In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So we have decided together as a group to talk about the Samaritan woman, since that's the upcoming gospel. So John chapter 4. You guys know the story. I'll read it to you very quickly. By the way, this is one of the longest gospels of the year in the church. And so you just pray that whoever gets picked to read it doesn't want to sing long. Right? You just want them to go fast. And unfortunately, this Sunday we won't read the Samaritan woman because it's the Feast of the Cross, and so we're going to read the readings for the Feast of the Cross instead. So we're going to skip the Samaritan woman, but I'll still talk about the Samaritan woman because she deserves to be talked about. All right. Okay, so I'll start chapter 4, verse 4. Now he had to go through Samaria, so he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and he sat down, and it was about noon. Okay, now the fact that it's noon, I'll just kind of highlight these points. I'm sure you've heard most of them, is significant, right? Because noon is a very hot time of the day, and no one draws water at noon. It's just too hot. Okay, so he's sitting there, a very hot time of the day, and then the Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food. So we see what's happening, right? This woman is coming to the well at noon, a time when you shouldn't come to the well. And why is she coming to the well at noon? Huh? Exactly, right? She's coming to avoid people, okay? Now, by analogy, right, we have a lot of people like this in our churches, right? There's a lot of people that like to come on Wednesdays and Fridays when no one else is there. There's people who've been divorced, people who everyone knows were on drugs, were in rehab, have other issues psychologically, mentally, or just have orange hair and earrings all over themselves, and they don't want to be seen because they don't feel like dealing from the looks of the people. So, which people is she afraid of? The righteous people, the good people, okay? Let me rephrase that. The people who are self-righteous, who think they're good, okay? And unfortunately for her and for us, there are still people who think like this. So these people that she's trying to avoid, unfortunately, fill our churches every Sunday. And the same looks that she got back in the year 29 AD are the same ones we get at the churches today. So the lesson was not learned. And what's the lesson? Staring at people with evil looks doesn't make them good. It just makes them avoid you. Okay? Now, you're thinking, I know that. That's easy. Why can't the uncles and aunts get this? Well, unfortunately, we do the same thing. Right? Every once in a while, we have a friend, we're like, no, I have to speak truth. I have to tell that friend what's right and what's wrong. I have to tell them what's up. I have to tell them what's wrong with them. I have to tell them. And you can easily revert into some kind of judgmental person. Right? And what happens is people just don't want to talk to you because they know they're going to get a sermon. And no one's interested in a sermon. Right? What are people interested in? Love. Right? Something. Talk to me. Be a friend. Help me out. Okay? So the lesson that these people didn't learn is a lesson we haven't learned. And it's not just a lesson that the Egyptians do. It's one we do as well. Right? And every once in a while we fall into that exact same trap. And we think by giving people dirty looks that we discourage them from being bad. It doesn't work like that. Right? Because all of you have gotten dirty looks for doing something bad. Whether it be your parents or a servant or a priest or an archdeacon, someone's looked at you real dirty because you left matcha on the floor. Masalan. Right? And it doesn't help. In this case, it actually did, which is odd, right? But it doesn't help to get a dirty look, right? And how many priests have made a comment about guys' hair, and you need to cut your hair, and la, 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 right? And the kids just say, I'm going to stop coming to this church. I'll go somewhere else, right? That's not that approach doesn't actually work, right? The approach that works is the one Christ took with her, okay? And which we'll see here in a second. Okay. But I want to warn you against that approach because it's very alive and well in our churches, and unfortunately it's very alive and well among the youth for some reason, who I thought would know better. But they don't seem to always know better. Okay. So he came Samaritan woman came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" Okay. This is something Christ does a lot of. Okay? Christ does a lot of this, which is do what? He asks us for things. Right? What did he ask Peter for? He said, "Can I use your boat?" Right? Now, did he really need his boat? He couldn't give a sermon from the shore. Didn't he give a sermon to 5,000 people? You think he needed the boat? He didn't need the boat. So God often asks us for something small. Right? And the goal of why Christ is asking is not because he needs, it's because he wants to give. And this is how Christ gives. He says, "Can I have?" Right? And if you look at all the stories, you see a very common pattern, right? He says to the kid, "Hey, can I have your fish and your bread?" Why? Why do you want to take from me? Well, because I want to give a lot of people a lot of things. Right? And even little things like when he raised Lazarus from the dead. Right? You guys know the story. Right? He raises Lazarus from the dead. He raised a dead man, okay? But he needed help what? Rolling the stone? Really? Did you really need help rolling the stone? What if the story went, and Christ waved his hand and the stone rolled? Would any of us bat an eyelash? Would any of us go, okay, stone rolled? Right? That's not the big miracle, right? The big one is that the guy's been dead for 4 days. So did he really need those people to push the stone? No. But how did they feel after they pushed the stone? Don't you think they all went home to their wives and said, I helped raise Lazarus from the dead. That was me. I did that. I pushed the stone. They're like, dang, you pushed the stone. Big boy. Right? And you feel real good about yourself because God's letting you do what? Participate in the miracle. So he says, give me something. Right? Can I borrow your boat? And then he does what? He fills it with fish. Right? You give, and then God says, thank you so much. I really needed that. And now I'm going to give you. Right? So he starts with, can I have some water? And you all know how the story ends. Does he ever get water? No. He never gets any water. Did he ever need any water? No. He didn't need any water. Right? So he says, can I have water? And his whole objective is what? I'm going to give you what? Living water. Right? And as the story continues, he's going to say, this water that you drink from, you're going to thirst again. The water I give you, you don't thirst again from. Right? So you're going to give me some lame water, right? Aquafina or some garbage like that, okay? And then I'm going to give you something way better, right? And this pattern is like, you see it all over, right? And like he tells Samson, hey, you know what? I'll tell you what, don't cut your hair. And what do I get in return for not cutting my hair? I'm going to give you superhuman strength. Good deal? Good deal. Right? I would kill for that deal. I don't even have hair, right? So this is how God trades with us. The trade is never fair. God never trades fairly. He says, you bring me bread and wine, and I'll give you my body and my blood. Right? Every transaction is like that. It's but you have to give me something. Right? And then I will reciprocate and give you so much more. Sorry, I have to keep it. Locks me out. Okay. He says, will you give me a drink? And his disciples had gone into the town to buy food. Quick side note. How long are they gone for? How long is this discussion? As you read it, it takes about 3 minutes. Maybe it went on for 20. Right? When they say go into town to get food, like they're not going to, Santa Barbara to get food, right? They're going from, here to 7 steps from here, right, is where the town is. Nothing's very far away, okay? So the Samaritan woman says to him, you are a Jew and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink, right? And obviously the Jews don't associate with the Samaritans. And there's several layers here, right? First thing, I'm a Samaritan, you're a Jew. If you don't know, the Samaritans are a group of Jews who kind of broke away from the true Jewish faith and mixed with other people, right? With pagan and all kinds of stuff. And so they were deemed as worse than Gentiles because basically they defiled the faith. Or they intermingled, they intermarried, they worship idols, they mixed pagan practices with Jewish practices, just a hodgepodge of messed upness, right? Loathed by the Jews, you are impure. In fact, when you walked, you wanted to walk around their town because their town was that bad of a town, and the dust on your feet would somehow taint you. Okay? So they did that. They walked around, instead of walking through. And she's a woman, and he's a man, right? So lots of layers of, you are superior to me, you should not talk to me, you should not interact with me in any way, right? I'm a bad person on every level, right? And then it gets worse here in a second, right? So A, I'm a woman, B, I'm a Samaritan woman, and C, what's coming up, the big whammo, is I happen to have 6 husbands, right? So, nothing good's coming out of this conversation, right? And we think to ourselves, gee, she's such a bad person. Do people exist like that? Well, yeah, all the time. In fact, I was at I probably shouldn't say this. I was at an event. I don't think I can say this without someone knowing who it is. But I don't think they'll mind that much. I was at an event, and there was someone there who had a lot of tattoos. And the first thing that person said to me when they saw me, dressed in black, is they apologized. They're like, yeah, I'm sorry, I have a lot of tattoos. It's like the first things out of their mouth, that they felt they had to apologize for that, And I was so sad that they thought they would need to apologize to me for having tattoos. Right? And of course I immediately said, I love your tattoos, right? These look great. Where'd you get them done? Okay. So there are people at all levels, right, who want to apologize for their existence. I'm sorry I'm like this. I'm sorry I'm gay. I'm sorry I have a boyfriend and girlfriend that I live with. I'm sorry I haven't been to church in 6 months. I'm sorry. And she's apologizing for herself, and she's kind of wondering, why are you speaking to me? Okay? Again, this is not unusual. This is what's happening now, right? There's so many instances, right, where clergy interact with people, and the people are like, why are you speaking to me? Why do you talk to me? Right? Don't you see the way I am? Don't you see the nose piercings and the ear piercings and the, right? I'm the bad people. Okay? And, obviously what Christ teaches us is how to love. Okay. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and would have given you living water. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? Jesus answered, everyone who drinks from this water will be thirsty again. So I want you to stop and look at this comment. And it's a very important comment. Everyone who drinks from this water will be thirsty again. What do you think of that kind of rocket scientist, right? And you're like, wow, you're a pretty smart guy. Right? That'd be my reaction, really. Isn't that obvious? I'd probably make fun of him, is what I would do. Right? Jesus said to me, everyone who drinks this water will thirst again. I'd be like, wow, you're a pretty smart guy, right? So, is he though? So let's think about what the world's water is like. It's such an obvious statement, but yet we don't get it, do we? Right? How many of us have tried to drink of the world's water and said, all right, last time? How many times have we said last time? And then you get what? Thirsty again, right? Is there a level of money that satisfies you? Is there a level of drinking that satisfies us? Is there a level of lust that satisfies us? Is there a level of manipulation and control and deceit that satisfies us? Is there a level that ever satisfies you? Or do you get thirsty again? And that's the way the world is. Everything in the world, no matter how much of it you consume, makes you thirsty again. And you think, and we've had this experience, right? You drink all this water, like, oh my God, I'm so full of water. I'm never going to drink again, which is just a stupid statement, right? But you may feel that way at the moment. And someone's like, hey, you want some water? Like, no, I'm full, man. I just drank a whole 2-liter bottle of water. But intellectually, right, pretty soon you're going to get thirsty again. But yet, with the world, that doesn't happen, right? I keep going back. And every time I go, I just one more, right? In fact, we even have an expression for it, right? For young people, we say, you got to sow your wild oats. Anyone heard this expression? You guys are too uncultured behemoths. All right, so young people, we say, sow your wild oats. That means you have to get it out of your system, right? In fact, I was just with someone today who's an addict, and he kept saying, I don't think I'm done yet. He felt like he's gonna fall again. He was gonna, what's the word, relapse, right? He's like, I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm like, what does that mean? I'm not done yet. Okay, it's bad self-talk, right? There's a level at which you're going to reach the bottom. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, right? It could just be dead, right? In case of the drug he's on, that's probably likely. Right? So the I'm not dead yet implies that there's some level that I'm going to reach and I'm going to be like, okay, now I'm good, right? That level does not exist in the world, not even with water, let alone anything the world has to offer us, right? And we all know people who have a really, really big house and think, oh my God, I'm never going to need anything else after this. Does that work? Or do they want another house and a bigger house and then get a boat and another boat and a car and a bigger car and another car, right? No one stops. No one stops. So he tells this to her. He says, if you drink of this water, you're going to thirst again. And she's like, oh, wow. And she says, but whoever drinks of the water I will give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And this comment you have to stop at and think, right? When God is in someone, right? When God touches someone and when you touch God, the way it works is it's like this expression, a spring of water welling up, right? You can imagine a miracle where someone touches the ground and then this spring just keeps coming, right? You guys know what a spring looks like, right? And it's just kind of this magical thing, right? Because water keeps coming. It doesn't stop, like a fountain. Like if you think about a fountain, now we have fake fountains, right? But any fountain is a marvel, right? The water keeps coming out of it. It doesn't stop, right? This fountain of life. And that's where God is when he touches people. It just keeps coming out of them and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. And it'll like, the well, I think of the fountain at St. Anthony's Monastery, right? That, just as one well just keep coming and it gave all St. Anthony enough to drink and all the monks enough to drink and the monastery enough to drink, and it just doesn't stop. It's still going to this day, right? It actually has never stopped. So, and no one knows where the water is coming from, right? Because you're in the middle of Sinai or in the middle of the desert, right? There's not many water sources around, right? So that's the way God is when he touches someone. The person just keeps giving and giving and giving and producing, and he just wells up water. And you don't know where it's coming from. And a fountain, when you think about it, is kind of a miracle, right? That just something just produces water and just keeps at it. I think I'm just going to have to keep touching. Okay. The woman said, "Sir, give me this water so I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming to this well." Obviously, she thinks it's a physical water. And he tells her, "Go call your husband and come back." Right? So we know how this goes. She goes, "I have no husband," she replied. So what I like about this interaction, and Jesus says to her, "You are right when you say I have no husband." He kind of compliments her, right? Because she didn't have to own it, did she? She could have said some husband's busy, husband's whatever, right? And in fact, he said, I like that you said you have no husband. And I'll give you a little fun fact. I know you happen to have 5 husbands. Okay? So what's he doing? And this is a very important characteristic of Christ and something subtle that he does that's very beautiful. He points out the good in people. He finds what's good in people and he brings it to the forefront and he highlights it. Right? So he could say, you're a tramp is what you are, and in this day and age, and A, you're a Samaritan, and B, you're a blah blah blah, and now you're married. But he didn't. He said, you know what? I like you. You tell the truth, and it resonated with her, right? Because she's like, yeah, I do tell the truth. I could have easily lied. She could have said 10 things. But she didn't. She's honest. Right? And he brought that out. And because he reacted to her that way, it opened her up. Right? And sometimes when we react with kids or with other people, you're so quick to find all the things wrong with the other person. What's much, much harder, but yet much more beautiful, is to find the one thing that's good in someone and then point it out. Don't lie. It's truthful. She does tell the truth. She's a truthful person. And she kind of, I am a truthful person. You, what? You see me. Right? You see me. You see who I am. And people want to be seen. People want to be seen. And they want to know you see them. And one of the characteristics of saints is when they look at you, you feel like you're the only person on earth. Like when you have a conversation with a saint, you guys should try this someday. They look at you like you're it. And they're just looking right into your eyes, and there's no one else. They see you. And they see everything about you. So people want to be seen, and that's exactly what he did. He highlighted what was good in her. And he's like, it's right that you have no husband. And so he wanted to let her know, I'm also happen to be a prophet, if not more. So you have had 5 husbands. And the man you're with now is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Again, a compliment. Sir, the woman said, I see that you're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim blah, blah, blah. And now I want you to see what she does. You're a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. Woman, believe me, a time is coming when you worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know, but we worship what we know, for salvation is of the Jews. What did she just do? She's a woman. The guy just said, you've had 5 husbands. You're living with a guy who's not your husband. What did she say? Hey, where should we worship anyway? What's she doing? She's changing the subject, right? She's deflecting. This is getting uncomfortable. I'd rather not talk about my 5 husbands and my past. Which hand do you hold the shorya in? Should we wait 40 days or 80 days after baptism, after birth, to baptize the baby? She's asking for details. She's changing the subject, right? And what does Christ do? He goes right along with her. She's uncomfortable. He's made her uncomfortable, right? He's poked at something she didn't want to expose to the world, especially this guy who she doesn't know. And he's like, well, let's talk about where we worship and Jews and salvation and all that other stuff, since that's what we seem to want to talk about now. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth, and that's where this very famous verse comes from, spirit and truth. The woman said, I know that the Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. Then Jesus declared, I, the one who's speaking to you, am he. Right? And so this is where Christ very clearly says, I am the Messiah. And who does he declare it to? The theologians, St. Athanasius, Ambasarapion, Pope Tuadros, a sinful Samaritan woman. And this is one of the more clear times when he said, I am the Messiah. He didn't, here he's not mincing words at all. Pilate, who do you say that I am? And who do people say? And you have said it. And with her, I am he. Right? And in fact, we know that she becomes the first preacher of Christ. Right? She goes to her city. She tells us everybody about him. And he changes her, and then she changes them. And then the disciples rejoin. So let me ask you this. What's the point of spiritual life? There's lots of points, but give me a big one. Ideas, thoughts. There's probably no wrong answer, as Joseph says it. Not you, Joseph. You have right answers. Not just. the point of the spiritual life? In the end. I mean, there's lots of reasons, right? But one of them, to become the image and likeness of God, right? To become like our Father. And those words imply what? Movement. To become like, right? And we understand this even from the way God created children and parents, right? Children become like their parents. It's a process, right? Some of it genetic, some of it environment, right? And a big part of it genetic, right? You're just kind of heading in that direction anyway. But a large part of it is environment, right? The parents are molding you to be like them, right? Like we said, parents basically have one job, right? Make them in their image and likeness, right? That's what your parents try to do. So when they say, don't say those things, right? When you say something they don't like, they say, don't say that. What are they really saying? I wouldn't say that. So you shouldn't say that, right? And if you do something they like, they say, good job. What are they really saying? That's something I would do. It's good, right? And so they're trying to just make you like them. I mean, not consciously, but that's what we all do, right? We want our kids to be like us because we think we're pretty good, right? So that process is a movement, right? When does my child become my image and my likeness? There's no magic moment, right? It just keeps, every day is a little bit more, right? They live in the same house. We have conversations. We talk together. They do something, I punish them. They do something I like, I reward them. It's a constant feedback loop. They ask me my opinion. I say, well, maybe I would do it like this, but not like that. They say they did this, and I'm like, ooh, that's going to cause a problem because this can happen, and this person can tell that person, right? So I'm constantly feeding into them, right? And they're evolving into me, right? At some level, okay? So the spiritual life is about what? This evolution, which means what? The whole thing is about change. Okay? And when you look at this conversation is a half-hour conversation. It's not long. And yet the impact of this conversation is stunning. She went from super sinner to super preacher. Bam. Half an hour. It didn't take 700 meetings and 3,000 hours of services and a million whatevers. It's half an hour, right? And what's amazing about this conversation is how quickly the change happened and how completely the change happened. But what isn't surprising about this is the inevitability of what happened. Because whenever light meets darkness, light always wins. And so the takeaway from this story is this is always the outcome of whenever someone meets Christ, person changes. And it just has to be. There's no other way this ends, right? I always think of this in Luke chapter 11, I think, or 7. There's a story about Jesus walking with his disciples, and about a funeral of a son of a widow, her only son, right? So she's a widow, she already lost her husband, and now her only son is dead, okay? Which basically means for someone in that time, right, when your husband dies, you have no way to feed yourself, so you need your son to work. Son dies, you go into a life of prostitution, you do something to make money, who knows, your end is bad. This doesn't go well for you, right? So she's in bad shape, right? And there's this procession, led by the casket, right? And this mother weeping over her son, okay, this widow. And it's kind of like these two processions collide, right? And the beauty of these two processions is one is led by Christ and one is led by death, right? One is led by life and one is led by death. And when life meets death, or light meets darkness, the outcome is always the same. Light always wins. Life wins. Right? So these two processions collide, and the outcome is always what? Whoever is dead is now alive. When someone meets Christ, they have to change. Okay? So change becomes the measure, if you will, of whether or not we've met Christ. So sometimes, we can go to church for years, decades, and then we're the same person we were 15 years ago, which is weird, right? There are a lot of adults my age, older, some younger, not many, right, who are spiritually 16-year-olds still, 20-year-olds. They think like a 20-year-old does, spiritually. They haven't grown in a couple of decades. It's weird, but it happens. Right? I mean, if I met a kid, right, and I say, hey, kid, what grade are you in? He goes, I'm in first grade. That's great. And then 5 years later, I see the same kid. I say, hey, kid, what grade are you in now? He's like, I'm in first grade. I'd be like, hey, that's kind of weird. Why are you still in first grade? And I tell my friends, this kid's still in first grade after 5 years. It's kind of strange. We'd laugh at him. We'd point, right? Make him feel real good about himself. So it's kind of weird that the kid's still in the same place. And yet spiritual life can be that way very easily, right? You ever go to a school, like I was in Catholic school, so they made us do this. March in place. You ever see this? Especially the boys. Right? You march in place. You stand there and they say, march in place. So they want you to move to get your energy out, but they don't want you moving. So they tell you to march in place. Sometimes spiritual life can be like marching in place. You're doing things. You're moving your legs up and down. But you're not going anywhere. You're just doing. Right? And next thing, a year passes, 5 years passes, a decade passes, a couple decades pass, and you're still same. How can that be? It can't be. We can't meet Christ and remain the same. And I'm not talking about the one time I met Jesus when I was 16. No, I'm talking about every meeting, every time, every prayer, every liturgy. You can't meet him and come out of it the same every single time. Right? I mean, once I asked a kid, we were like after church, and he's like 15 or 16 or something, and I said, I didn't see you. Did you take communion today? This is like a couple years ago now, 20 years ago now, Sunday school teacher. And he goes, oh, no, I didn't. No, wait, I did. Right? And just that stutter. I was like, you don't know? You don't remember? Was it that meaningless to you? Like you can't, did I take, wait, is that last week? No, that was this week. Yeah, no, I did take communion this week. It meant nothing to you. Right? It was that much of a routine. Stand the line, I do the thing, and I leave. Right? And does that happen? All the time, every week. To us, sure. To good people, bad people, yeah. But when we find that situation, we realize that week I didn't meet Christ. Something's off. That week I was in first grade, and then a year later I was in first grade again. Right? So the reality of meeting Christ is always change. After every encounter, you can't come away the same. All right? And that's kind of the thermometer, right? The thermometer that measures the temperature, right? Change in the life of the Christian is always a part. And spiritual life by its nature is a movement. It's not a state. It's a movement towards the image and likeness of God. And that doesn't end, ever. Right? It's a constant movement. Does that make sense? Okay. Then leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? They came out of the town and made their way towards him. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, saying, eat something. But he said, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. And then it said, many of the Samaritans from that town, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything that I ever did. So when the Samaritans came to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed 2 days. And because of his words, many more became believers. They said to the woman, we no longer believe just because of what you said. Now we have heard for ourselves, and we know that this man really is the Savior of the world. Okay, so I'll end with this last point, which is, and I think I told you this analogy before, but Saint Hilarion talks about a hunting dog who chases a hare. You guys heard this before, right? The hare is the bunny, the little rabbit, right? And the hunting dog sees the hare, and there's a pack of hunting dogs, and he takes off after the hare. The hare runs for its life, and the dog is after it. And the other dogs in the group give chase as well. Right? They know this guy's onto something, and they chase the dog. And after a while, the other dogs who didn't see the hare stop running because they get tired. They trip and break their leg, and they step on something that hurts, and they run through some bushes and scratch their whatever, right? But the dog who saw the hare doesn't stop running, okay? Because he's committed to what he's seen. Okay? So ultimately, I love what they said. They said, in the beginning we believed because of what you said, but now we believe because we have seen for ourselves, right? And this always reminds me of the psalm that David the prophet said, which is, taste and see that the Lord is good. And this should be something we should all be striving for, right? I don't want any of us to do anything because someone told us to do it, right? Or because I believe that other people have these great experiences. So, no, I mean, you can do that in the beginning, right? You can be that dog that chases the other dog, right? But after a while, you're chasing another dog's butt, and it's not interesting or inspiring. You're just following the herd. You're following the pack. Everyone's doing this, so I do it. Everyone's going to this meeting, I go. Everyone's attending this liturgy, so I attend. And you're just following the herd. But you're not following Christ. You're just following other people. Right? And that is uninspiring and doesn't last. Eventually you get tired. Eventually, I'm sick of just following other people. I'm sick of just doing this. Right? And so what they said to her was, we used to believe because you told us, and now we believe and seen for ourselves. So let me rephrase that. When we believed because you told us, right? She said, come see this man who told me everything I ever did, and we believed you. What they're really saying is, this wasn't going to last, by the way. Right? We would have been like, okay, that's great. Yeah, that's great for you. You had a great experience. Yeah, I met this guy. He changed my life. She's changed. And they'd be like, yeah, we're not going to change. I mean, it's great what you went through, and I want to validate you and reaffirm your experience that what you did was really cool, but I'm not changing, right? Because I just heard about him from you, and that's lovely, but I did not taste and see that the Lord is good. But when they met him, then they changed, right? And so all of us can start the change process because we heard someone say something, right? But ultimately, we have to, for ourselves, make this decision. And we can only make it for ourselves. And no one can make it for us. And it has to come from the source. Right? It has to be me and God. Right? And I find him, and he finds me. And it's very, very personal. Right? It's between me and God. And no one needs to understand it. I shouldn't even talk to too many people about it. I don't have to explain it to anyone. It's just me and God. It's our thing. Right? Not the world's, right? And it's something, as Jesus said, right? The person who found the pearl of great price and bought the field and hid the pearl, right? Once we find that pearl, we hide it. The objective is not to put it on display and tell everyone about it and give testimonials. The point is, it's between me and God, and it's something that's hidden, right, in our own spiritual life. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, Christian.
Back to the previous point when Christ pointed out the truth for the Samaritan woman, how we should look for the good in people, and we should search for Christ in people, and grab onto that and love that and embrace that within them, and get to know their heart, get to know Christ in their heart. What does that process look like?
So the process is more about you than it is about them, right? So you'll find that you'll be with people and you and your friend will be walking, and you'll interact with someone at the grocery store. I don't know, someone in the cashier line, and you both walk away, and you're like, man, he's like, man, did you see his teeth? His breath was so bad, and like his grammar was bad, and what an idiot. And you're like, wow, that guy was one of the nicest people I've ever met. Did you see how he did blah, 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 right? So what's the difference? We both met the same person. We both had the same interaction. Right? I mean, look at the story, right? When Jesus would do a miracle, some people would be like, this is the Messiah. And then the Pharisees would be like, this is Beelzebub, the prince of devils. I mean, it's the same guy. He just did the same thing. And you're like, one person's here and one person's here. And one person says, Beelzebub, prince of devils. And the other one's like, truly, this is the Son of God. What's the difference? It's not the person. It's you. So when you're saying, how do we get to this point? It's all about your own. It's about what it reflects is the purity of your own heart, was what you see in other people, right? And when you see just bad in everybody, like I do, right, then there's something lacking. There's something missing, right? But there's other people, like you have these interactions, and they're like, Shafe, this guy is just so sweet, isn't he? He's such a saint. And there are people I've met saints, and they meet me, they're just like, you're such a great person, and they're just exuding all this niceness, right? Where's it coming from? It's from them. Because their eye is pure, they see what's good, right? So I wouldn't say I need to learn how to see the good in people. I need to practice that trait and characteristic, and I need to find what's good and point it out, and because that's what the good people do, right? Don't use it as a commandment. Use it as a measure, right? Use it as saying, how much good do I see in people? If not, something's wrong. What's wrong? Why don't I see good in people? Like there are measures, like, a baby, right? You guys, well, you will, when you have kids, you go to a pediatrician, right? And then at every stage, the pediatrician measures, right? And then these flow charts, right? And then these charts. And then they tell you, your kid's 20th percentile on height and 30th percentile on weight, whatever, right? So they're tracking their growth, and they're looking for a line and a trajectory, right? And if you fall off that trajectory, okay, you can be 5 percentile, right? But you have to stay 5 percentile, okay? But if you're 30 percentile, then you go to 20 percentile, there's a problem, right? You're off a path, right? So what does that mean? My kid's not growing. What does that mean? What's the problem? The problem isn't growth or not growth. The problem is what's keeping him from growing. Right? So now the doctor's going to run tests, right? Because something inside is preventing him from growing, right? There could be some bacteria, there could be a problem, there could be some genetic thing. We don't know. We got to figure this out, right? But the issue isn't, oh my gosh, he's 30 percentile, now he's 20. I wonder if he's going to be a short kid. No one cares, right? What we care about is what's inside that's stunting his growth, okay? So the outside measure is how much you weigh. But that's not really what we care about. We don't care about weight. Okay? So the outside measure can be, how much do I love people? Or how much good do I see in people? But that's not what anyone cares about. What cares about is if you don't see that, what's going on inside that's preventing you from seeing that, right? And that's the part I got to work on, right? This inside life with God, the hidden life with God that isn't, So the measures aren't the things that we're looking for. Does that make sense? Otherwise, this is where like Islamic law kind of comes in, right? Where you're based on measures, right? Because, like in Islam, when you go to the mosque 5 times a day, you are good. That makes you good. Like that means you did a good thing, right? And God's like counting, and he gives you points, right? So we've obviously inherited some of that, right? Where we think the more I go to church, the better I am, or or God blesses me more, or likes me more, or gives me more points, or, give me, more kids and babies, and a Mercedes, right? Because I've gone to church more times than this other guy, right? So we think that way. And the reason maybe we think that way is we misinterpret some signs, right? So I'll find a saint and say, man, that guy went to church every day. And he's a saint. I know what I'll do. I'll go to church every day and I'll become a saint. No, it doesn't work like that. He goes to church every day because he loves God, right? And that's just how it manifests. Okay? Me imitating the thing he does doesn't make me love God. It just means I go to church every day, right? The real thing, the construct, if you will, for those of you guys who use this language, right? The construct that's the underlying thing is his love for God. It just happens to show because he goes to church all the time. But me imitating him isn't going to do anything, Nor is it a measure of my love for God. It's just me going to church faking it, right? Or acting in a certain way, Yes.
After these changes with the interaction with Christ, do you have any advice for combating imposter syndrome or doubts about sustaining the change?
So the imposter syndrome is what we all have, right? So I have imposter syndrome. I wear a black dress, but it's imposter syndrome, right? What I wouldn't do is think too far into the future, right? It's like, am I really going to be a good Christian in 30 years? I don't know. I don't think I can keep this up. Never mind, right? And this is something, we all do, right? And you put 30 years in front of anything and everyone's going to say, hey, I can't do that for 30 years, right? I mean, it's like, name the thing, right? I mean, you work out, right? And it's like, hey, let's go to the gym. What, you're going to go to the gym for the next 45 years? What, are you crazy? Just quit now, okay, right? And then nobody go, you know what I mean? Because you've put this impossible thing in front of you. Well, of course that looks daunting and you're not going to do it, right? So, don't do that, right? If someone says, well, I'm not going to go to the gym for the next 45 years. Like, well, how about we go right now? You want to go for half an hour? Do you have half an hour to go right now? Yeah, I can do that. Okay, let's do that. Okay, and it is with everything, right? If you're an addict, right, you don't say, am I going to really be able to be sober for the next 30 years? There's no way. I'm definitely going to relapse. Well, if you think like that, you're done, right? But can you hold off today? Can you hold off for the next 6 hours? Yeah, I can hold off for the next 6 hours. Okay, let's do that, right? So keep things small, right? And then it doesn't get daunting, Yes?
How do you get out of that marching in place stage?
The what?
The marching in place stage?
Oh, yeah. First thing to do is recognize that marching in place is not productive. Is simply identifying that I'm marching in place right now. And once you identify that, everything flows from there. The problem is sometimes we're actually taught to march in place. That's good. March in place. It's better than nothing. I don't know that it is. I don't know that forcing someone to eat food a certain way during fasting time when they have and you just force them to do it. I mean, maybe as a kid you want them to get used to it, maybe, but I don't even think that's a great idea, right? Because then I think when I eat tameya, then everything's okay, right? I would much rather say I'm not fasting, and when I'm ready to fast, I will fast correctly, versus I'm just kind of doing it and then drugging my conscience into thinking, well, at least I'm fasting. At least I didn't break it this week. As if God's like, well, you didn't break it this week. Good job. Here's 11 points. Or 12 points. I forget what the note is. Yeah, it depends on the week. It's exponential. It's true. Not every week counts the same. But if you get 3 weeks in a row, you get double bonus points, right? It's kind of like Starbucks. That's a thing. That's a real thing.
Yeah, I love Celsius.
Okay, good. And Celsius. So I think the first thing is you realize, look, I'm just standing in place, right? So now, once you're aware of it, you'll do something about it. Okay, the worst thing we do is kind of like the story of the prodigal son, right? I've served you all these years, but I don't love my dad, right? And we can easily find ourselves, and there's a lot of people in the church who say the same thing. I've served you all these years. And the dad's looking at him like, you don't even love me. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm a priest. You don't even love me, right? And Jesus even said this, right? He says, there are people who are going to say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not cast out demons in your name and raise the dead in your name? And Jesus is going to say, I never knew you, which is scary to hear, right? So I can be a priest, I can be a bishop, I can be a monk, I can be serving a Sunday school teacher, deacon, whatever, right? And have no relationship with God and think, because I'm marching in place, that I'm doing something, right? So I think as long as you're aware, you'll move. But if you're like, God's happy with this, God wants me to just, then you won't. You'll be like the prodigal son, older son. Good? Any other questions, comments? Matcha? Nothing? Thoughts? All right. Glory be to God forever. Amen.